Shall see. Well, Mark, I mean, can you remember the name of a union backer for the Conservative Party?
No, I can't, but I haven't been having dinner with them an hour ago. I think Ed Balls' problem was that two things, I think. One was that he said he'd been having dinner earlier that evening, sat next to this particular person, so it was a little strange he couldn't remember who he'd been having dinner with an hour or so before. And I think the bigger problem was it demonstrated that Labour has a real problem in finding business people, even business people who were Labour donors and Labour peers, who think they have a credible economic policy, because they don't.
Right, but even if I gave you time, could you think of a union backer for the Conservative Party?
If you gave me time, I probably could, but I wasn't having dinner with them an hour ago. If I'd been having dinner with them an hour ago, I think I probably could have remembered.
OK. Now, hundreds of disabled people are worried that they'll lose their ability to live in their own homes because of changes to their benefits. At the moment, the most severely disabled can be paid up to £42,000 a year to employ helpers round the clock. But the scheme called the Independent Living Fund is being shut down. Here's Chris Brierley.
For over 20 years, Clare Gray's worked full-time, paid taxes and lived an active life. But now she says that's under threat with changes to her benefits.
My condition is called spinal muscular atrophy. It's a very rare condition for people of my age, and what it means is all my muscles are weak. So it means that I cannot walk, I cannot stand in any way, and I'm unable to do anything for myself at all. And people don't always understand what that means, but for example, I can't lift my hands up to my face at all. So I can't feed myself, I can't wash myself. Hello, Clare Gray speaking.
On the day we meet, she's planning a business trip to London.
At the moment, if I pick you up at 11:45 from the train station, would that be okay?
This wouldn't be possible without money from the Independent Living Fund. Set up in 1988, 18,000 people in the UK receive money from it. £260 million is being given to local councils from July this year, before it's phased out next March. Each person on average receives £300 per week.
Because make no mistake, the end of the ILF will have a devastating impact.
Campaigners took the government to the courts over the scrapping of it, but that legal challenge failed.
Just having a bit of mayo, no butter.
Clare gets around £3,000 a month, and that money enables her to employ 8 personal assistants.
It means I have support throughout my daily life at home and at work. So my assistants drive me to wherever I need to go, and they assist me with all my paperwork, helping me answer the phone, taking notes. They are there with me, living my life with me 24 hours a day.
For people like Clare and around 900 others across the southwest, the Independent Living Fund is the difference between having an active life contributing to society, the alternative, living in residential care and being stuck in their own homes. The government view is the model is outdated and that actually councils can pick up the tab. But in these times of austerity with council budgets being tight, can they?
Well, it's a bit of a false economy cutting it, because it could end up costing us more in the long term, especially if people are in situations where they start losing their independence and then they're having to have even more care packages to help them live.
South Gloucestershire Council met this week and agreed to keep the fund going until March. But not all councils might take this approach, as the money's not ring-fenced. The government, though, insists it's not abandoning people like Clare Gray.
This government is committed to supporting disabled people. Changes in social care have called into question having a separate funding stream through the ILF, especially as the vast majority of disabled people are already looked after through the adult social care system and local councils.
Back in her home in Yate, Clare doesn't feel reassured.
No, I don't have any faith. I mean, the eligibility criteria for social care funding is very different to ILF, and social care is about care, it's not about independent living. I've always contributed, I haven't just taken from the state, and this is all at risk now, and that's what people don't understand. It's all at risk, and yet disabled people will become more reliant.
Clare Gray's been able to live an independent life, but she says without the ILF, trips out of the house in the future might be limited.
Well, I'm delighted to say that Clare is with us now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in today. Do you seriously think that you're lose these benefits?
It's a worry and it's a concern. I mean, for myself, I am so restricted in what I'm able to do. I rely on somebody to be with me 24 hours, and to be honest, I couldn't be left at any point on my own. But there are lots and lots of disabled people, especially those with learning difficulties, who only use their funding to go out and about, and that is more what's at risk, because social care funding pays for care, so it pays for your basic need, as in to be washed, dressed, fed and toileted, but it doesn't pay for social or domestic support, and that's what's at risk.
And
so
you employ 8 people to look after you?
Yeah, so they all work different times and days, and they provide me care and support around the clock, 24 hours a day.
And how much does that cost you?
That costs, on average, about £4,000 a month.
So £48,000 a year just for the basics of being looked after?
Yeah.
And without that, you'd be absolutely stuck.
Well, I wouldn't exist. I would be at risk. You know, I can't feed myself. I can't give myself a drink. I can't move myself in any way.
OK. Well, Mark is the Disabilities Minister. What would you like to say to him?
Hello, Mark. My concern is that you're saying that you're passing the management on to local authorities, but actually the funding is only going to be given to local authorities for an 8-month period, and after that time there's no additional funds being given. So at a time when local authorities are really strapped for cash, they're finding budgets really, really hard, you've brought in the new care bill, which is actually going to make it more eligible for people to receive care. You know, there's going to be more people needing care.
Okay.
How are they supposed to fund that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, as you rightly say, all the money that the Independent Living Fund spends at the moment will be transferred to local authorities
for 8
from
months.
July.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm doing as the Minister for Disabled People is making sure that I work with the Department for Communities and Local Government and the Treasury, so that when we do the local government funding after the election, obviously if we're in power, that we know what all that spending is in those local authorities, so we can build that into the system. And you mentioned the Care Act, which comes into force in April, and actually that does mean that actually local authorities, as part of their assessing disabled people's needs, the fact that people can live independently is absolutely in the legislation and is part of what they're trying to do. So it isn't just about your basic needs, it's about making sure people can do what you do, which is live independently, work and contribute, which is what
but
we
you
want
can't guarantee
to
that
do.
she'll keep that money, can
Well,
you? Because you handed it over to the local authority with no requirement that they have to spend it on that.
Well, there is a requirement on them meeting her needs. They have to do a needs assessment through the social care system. Anyone that would be...
But they don't necessarily have to keep her in her own home,
anyone who thinks that... I mean, I don't understand this issue about people being concerned about own home or residential care, because from a local authority's perspective, residential care is very expensive. So the idea that they're going to put people in residential care to save money is, I simply don't think, not true. A local authority is supposed to look at someone's needs, their ability to be independent,
let's bring in
and they have to use that when they're making their judgments about the support
what would
they
UKIP
provide.
do?
Well, I mean, this proposal seems to me to come into the category of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, 97% of the users of the Independent Living Fund are satisfied with the service, and the total amount which is spent on overheads for this is only about 2% of the total amount of money which it costs.
So you wouldn't cut it?
So we would not have changed the present system, and I can't see really what the point of doing this is, because you don't want to save money on this proposal.
No, but we had to close it because it was unsustainable. So the way it was set up
So
at
it
the
is to
moment
save
wasn't.
money?
No.
Well, if it's unsustainable, it means you want to save money.
We closed it in 2010 because to new entrants because it wasn't sustainable. And the thing is, when it was set up in 1988, it was supposed to be set up as a temporary measure. The care and support system.
So you are doing it to save money?
The care and support
Mark,
system.
you are doing it to save money because you say it's not sustainable.
We're transferring all of the money
For
that's
1 year.
currently spent
For 1
in
year.
the Independent Living
For
Fund to local authorities.
For 8 months.
Well, the only reason it's not for longer is simply because we can't make commitments about what the next government is going to do, because we have an election on May the 7th.
Yeah,
Well, you make commitments about lots of things. Why can't you?
but
I mean,
what
you see, it seems to me that someone like Clare is extremely vulnerable and really ought to be a government's top priority, shouldn't it?
Well, sure, that's why we've protected...
You don't care... I mean,
well, that's
your
why
opponents will say you don't care about bonuses, you don't care about executive pay.
That's why we've protected... Well, that's why we've protected the spending on disability. We're spending £50,000 million a year on disability benefits. The Access to Work scheme, which is about helping disabled people stay in or get into work, we've increased the spending on that. And there are 250,000 more disabled people in work.
Sorry, can I just say, the access to work is only payable when somebody can work 16 hours or more. What Independent Living Fund provides is access to people to have that opportunity to go and seek work in the first place, which you won't get funding from the local authority to do. The running costs of the ILF are 2%, and for the local authority it's 16%. So how can you say that's saving money?
I'm terribly sorry I have to interrupt you, but because we have to move on. But are you reassured at all by what the Minister's had to say?
No, not at all.
Thanks very much indeed for coming.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, while